The most recent hunter released into Identity 5, Ivy, the Shadow, is probably one of the most unfun hunters to go against in the game right now, up there with Bloody Queen. To fully understand why, let's first look into why Bloody Queen is so unfun to go against. Bloody Queen's ability is her mirror, which she can place to create a mirror projection of herself. Now what's the problem, you may ask? Well, the issue is that her mirror self can phase through all obstacles, no exceptions, meaning it is impossible to kite it if she places it near you. The amount of counterplay her mirror has is minuscule. The best you can do is delay her mirror by breaking line of sight. That's it. Any good Bloody Queen won't fall for any bait tactics and will always be accurate with her mirrors, making her impossible to wall kite. Meaning that if you aren't a survivor with an item that can counter mirror, like Perfumer's Perfume or Cheerleader's Cheer, then you just die, which isn't fun at all. There's next to no interactivity between the survivor and the hunter in this engagement. The Bloody Queen waits for the perfect opportunity to place mirror, and if you don't have an item to answer to it, you just get hit. The fun factor of facing a Bloody Queen is next to nothing, because of the lack of counterplay and interactivity between the hunter and the survivor. Now let's look at a hunter who's fair and fun to go against. Nightwatch. Against Nightwatch, you can work around his Wind Tempest via tight kiting him and having a good kiting route planned. Having items helps a lot against him, yes, but they aren't required to kite him. That's the main difference between him and Bloody Queen. He has actual good counterplay beyond having an item to counter his ability, which makes for fun, interactive gameplay on both ends and makes him fun to go against. Now, how does this all relate to Ivy? Well, she has next to no counterplay whatsoever, for the most part. She can easily teleport directly onto your game with no real way of preventing it. Before she TPs though, you can stare at walls to prevent her from being able to scare you with her ghost prior to leeching, which makes catching you a lot harder because now she can't just scare with the ghost again to hit you and blink. Which, by the way, when the ghost is leeched on you, I'm 99% sure it's impossible to avoid its scare, which just makes her even less fun to go against. The only counterplay she has is constantly running and using items to transition, which, similar to Bloody Queen, she requires the use of specific survivors to be able to kite her, which is just boring. And the only way to avoid the ghost is to stare at walls, which comes with its own downsides, mostly a lack of knowledge on where the Ivy is, who you can't even look at anyway. So you're deprived of a lot of information and forced to transition constantly and make up for it, because tight kiting is impossible when any glance at her can cause you to get killed. And if you're not near any walls, avoiding the ghost just becomes a guessing game. You can try to predict where she'll try and scare from, but that counterplay is hardly effective given how large the scare hitbox is, and you'll get scared anyway 9 times out of 10. Now, let's cover the most optimal first chase. You avoided the first scare and were able to use as many god palettes and windows as possible to transition without any items, and have around 60 scare due to the unavoidable scare from her leeched ghost and the tomb. And, you're doing well. But she blinks you, and then now that her leech cooldown is over, she leeches you again, teleports onto you, and scares you with another unavoidable scare, and you die. Without any items to counter her, there's nothing you can do to prevent this. You will inevitably always die shortly after blink, and this is assuming the most optimal chase, where you avoid all the ghost scares and manage to avoid looking at Ivy the entire time as well, which is insanely unlikely due to the fact that you can't perpetually stare at walls the entire kite due to needing to transition from area to area, and are almost guaranteed to get scared before blink and die sooner. Because if you aren't staring at a wall, you're leaving it entirely up to luck if she manages to scare you or not. Because if her ghost isn't leashed onto you, she can't see where you're looking, and you can't tell where she's trying to scare from. So it's entirely luck based on both ends in favor of the Ivy, due to how she limits where your camera can be looking at with her main body, making it extremely hard to avoid getting scared by her huge scare hitbox. Now, everything I've said so far is all the issues she has at 0 presence. It only gets worse once she gets first presence and her leech cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds, making her able to TP more often. And more importantly, her max presence, which is by far one of the most unfair abilities in the game. It applies an instant 40 scare on the survivor within the radius of the tomb she teleports to, which, if you don't have an item to answer to her teleport, you're going to get hit. And it's entirely unavoidable even if you know she's coming, which makes it feel even less fair. She teleports onto you after leeching, gives an instant 40 scare, then another 40 scare that's unavoidable with her ghost, and need 20 from the tomb. So you basically get stunned instantaneously with no way to counter it at all. Does this sound fun to you? Getting a hit guaranteed on you no matter what you do against an unavoidable ability? Certainly doesn't sound fun to me. And let's quickly touch on her map pressure, specifically when she gets max presence. With her reduced leech cooldown and the timer on tombs preventing you from breaking them, and the fact that every time she TPs onto someone it's basically a free hit when her max presence is off cooldown, makes for a really strong cipher control. Borderline broken cipher control due to how long her tombs can last and how often she can TP around the map. So if you ever 3-cipher yourself against an Ivy, you're just entirely fucked with no chance of coming back whatsoever. Which is really fun! It's such great game design. So basically, I think Ivy is fundamentally flawed. Her whole ability to make it so survivors can't look at her moves around 90% of the interactivity between hunters and serves. And it narrows it down to just constantly transitioning without looking behind whatsoever, which doesn't make for fun gameplay at all. Not to mention her invisible ghost you can't see, making it next to impossible to avoid its scare due to not knowing where it is at all, thus having zero real counterplay beyond staring at walls. And her max presence ability being an unavoidable hit doesn't make things any better, and just adds to how unfun and unfair it is to face her. She's an overtuned hunter who at the very least deserves some sort of rework. Because if they just nerf her like they did Bloody Queen, then she'll just end up as another TIE hunter who isn't fun to face at all. Which isn't what I want. I want a rework, one that adds counterplay and more interactivity between her and the survivors, for more fun and engaging gameplay. And not have it all be unavoidable abilities that have zero interactivity between the hunter and the survivor. But that's all. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. See ya.